Dimly lit, marble-floored ballroom of the exclusive Metropolitan Museum of Art Gala in New York City, an event reserved for Manhattan's elite, $10,000 per plate minimum, was abruptly silenced. The cacophony of mingling billionaires and clinking champagne flutes immediately replaced by a singular, haunting piano melody emanating from a worn, upright piano tucked away in a shadowed corner, a stark contrast to the sophisticated modern art surrounding it. A man, Elias Vance, 38, worn tweed jacket over a faded dress shirt, calloused fingers. A catering assistant who'd been tasked with moving the neglected instrument was completely immersed in the music, his eyes closed as he poured 6 years of bottled-up grief and love into the keys. A spontaneous, almost desperate performance of a song titled Aurora's Lullaby. Completely unaware of the massive, catastrophic ripple effect this single, unscheduled act was about to unleash, particularly on Seraphina Thorne, 40, razor-sharp, black designer gown, CEO of Thorne Global Holdings, a $5 billion conglomerate, who, upon hearing the very first, unmistakable four-note progression, froze mid-sip of her vintage Bordeaux, the crystal glass shattering silently on the Persian rug as her carefully constructed emotional armor cracked, revealing a flash of absolute recognition, raw pain, and a terrifying, proprietary panic. The song was hers, written for her by her high school sweetheart, a melody that had been lost to time and tragedy a decade and a half prior, and here it was, played by a complete stranger who looked nothing like the ghost of her past, yet played with the exact, intimate nuance that only its composer could have known, making her instantly suspect a connection to a man she had spent years trying to forget and suppress all memory of, transforming her simple evening into a living nightmare of legal warfare and emotional manipulation for which he was utterly unprepared. And this was just the beginning of a confrontation that would unearth secrets buried thousands of miles away, transforming her simple evening into a living nightmare of legal warfare and emotional manipulation for which he was utterly unprepared. What happened next would shock everyone. But he had no idea this was only the beginning. Eli Vance's life in his cramped, third-floor walk-up apartment in the Red Hook neighborhood of Brooklyn, overlooking the persistent, metallic smell of the working port, was a relentless, grinding cycle designed only to sustain his daughter, Willow, 6, bright eyes, perpetually hopeful, wearing a carefully mended hand-me-down sweater. A brutal schedule that started at 4:30 a.m. with a paper route transitioned into a 6-hour shift as a construction site cleaner in Midtown and culminated in his evening gig working catering events like the one at the Met. The exhaustion etched permanently into his kind, slightly haggard face. The silent pain of his past, the unexpected, tragic loss of Willow's mother, a talented musician named Maya, was a constant, heavy presence, manifesting in the way he meticulously preserved Maya's few remaining possessions. An antique silver locket, a collection of sheet music, a worn photograph taken on the beach in Montauk, and the way he fiercely protected Willow from the harsh realities of their precarious financial situation, often skipping meals himself just to ensure Willow had an extra carton of milk. His only true solace, his private retreat from the relentless pressure of juggling 2 minimum-wage jobs and solo parenting, was the battered, out-of-tune piano he'd salvaged from a dumpster behind the catering hall, which he'd spent hundreds of late-night hours painstakingly restoring in their tiny living room, a process that was as much therapeutic as it was necessary for keeping his promise to Maya to keep music in Willow's life, knowing that the few melodies he could play, including the one he'd spontaneously performed at the gala, were the only tangible link he had left to his lost love and a life that had been tragically cut short. He often caught himself staring out the window at the distant, glittering skyline of Manhattan, the city that represented everything he couldn't have, yet the one he fought every day just to stay afloat in, the quiet desperation of his situation a ticking time bomb, and little did he know that the piano melody he played was about to ignite a firestorm that would consume his carefully constructed existence, threatening to take the one thing he held most dear, which was his precious daughter. The truth was far more devastating than he could imagine, and at that moment, everything started to change. Following the gala, a series of unsettling, easily dismissed incidents began to plague Eli Vance's already stressful existence. Subtle but persistent disruptions that felt more like calculated intrusions than random bad luck. beginning with his application for a slight raise at the catering company being inexplicably denied despite his flawless 3-year record and the subsequent aggressive poaching of his highest-paying weekend gigs by a new, overly ambitious manager named Victor, 40s, slicked hair, aggressively corporate, who seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Then, things escalated on a more personal level. The quiet, reliable second-hand sedan he used for his paper route suffered an inexplicable mechanical failure that the mechanic couldn't quite pinpoint, requiring a $900 repair bill that wiped out his meager savings earmarked for Willow's school trip. And a week later, during a routine renewal, the lease on his rent-stabilized Brooklyn apartment, a crucial anchor in their chaotic lives, was presented with a new, baffling clause that seemed to allow for immediate, no-fault termination with only 30 days' notice. A change the landlord couldn't adequately explain, merely shrugging and citing new management policies. The most unnerving sign, however, was the appearance of a sleek, dark gray Cadillac Escalade. Tinted windows, expensive, ominous presence that was frequently parked down the block from his apartment during the day and mysteriously absent when he came home from his late shift, an unsettling, silent surveillance that he initially attributed to paranoia born of financial stress, but which began to feel undeniably connected when he noticed the car parked again, not on his street, but across from Willow's public elementary school in an affluent area of Park Slope, prompting a primal surge of paternal fear, the culmination of these strange events, the professional setbacks, the financial drains, the escalating sense of being watched, began to coalesce into a terrifying, gut feeling that a powerful, unseen force was actively working against him, methodically dismantling the structural supports of his fragile life. A cold, calculated campaign that he couldn't yet identify but which felt intimately tied to the spontaneous moment he had allowed himself to play Maya's song, the tune now seeming less like an elegy and more like a distress signal that had been heard by the wrong and most dangerous person. But he had no idea this was only the beginning, and what happened next would shock everyone. The hammer blow finally fell in the most sterile and intimidating of settings. A formal letter, delivered by a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase, announcing a court summons regarding a petition for temporary custody of his daughter, Willow, filed by the aforementioned Seraphina Thorne, citing unstable environment and financial incapacity, a legal maneuver so audacious and devastating that it physically knocked the wind out of Eli. The unexpected encounter, however, came not in the courtroom but in the crowded, echoing hallway outside the initial procedural hearing at the Manhattan Family Court, where Eli, sweaty, dressed in his best, slightly ill-fitting suit, clutching a worn folder of bills and handwritten character references, was reeling from the cold, clinical assessment of his life by Thorne's high-powered legal team. Seraphina Thorne herself, the formidable CEO, was there, but she didn't address him with the expected legal hostility. Instead, she cornered him near the overflowing water fountain, her eyes, though still guarded, holding a strange, almost pleading intensity as she spoke in a low, rushed voice that cut through the judicial murmur. "The song, Mr. Vance. Aurora's Lullaby. Where did you get that song?" she demanded, her question not an accusation but a desperate inquiry. Eli, momentarily stunned by the directness and the raw emotion in her voice, admitted simply that it was a song his late wife, Maya, had composed for their daughter, a detail that visibly rocked Thorne, causing her to press her manicured fingers to her temples as if fighting off a sudden, crushing headache, her composure momentarily cracking to reveal a vulnerability that was terrifying in its intensity. The brief, explosive conversation was cut short by the arrival of her lead attorney, Mr. Sterling, 50s, impeccably tailored, icy demeanor, who efficiently whisked Seraphina away, but not before she managed to press a small, antique silver locket, identical to the one Eli treasured, into his palm with a look of profound, devastating regret, whispering, "There's more to this than money, Eli. Much, much more. And I think we were once family." A cryptic, earth-shattering statement that instantly complicated the custody battle from a simple class warfare injustice into a tangled, deeply personal mystery. Little did he know that this brief, electrifying exchange was not a sign of retreat, but the beginning of an intricate, emotionally draining chess game forcing him to consider the terrifying possibility that the woman trying to destroy his life might be intrinsically connected to the love he had lost. The truth was far more devastating than he could imagine. Eli's initial, primal response to Seraphina Thorne's cryptic revelation and the custody papers was pure, unadulterated resistance, a fierce, protective refusal to believe that the cold, calculated woman attempting to leverage her $5 billion empire to snatch his child could be anything other than a ruthless predator, rejecting the possibility of a past connection as a cynical ploy to disarm him. However, the weight of the custody battle, itself an agonizing, bureaucratic nightmare of endless paperwork, expensive retainer fees, and invasive home inspections, was rapidly draining his already limited resources and his emotional fortitude, forcing him to take on extra shifts that left him perpetually sleep-deprived and emotionally hollowed out. The impossible decision to help arose not from Seraphina's words but from an unexpected, devastating revelation about Willow's health, disclosed by her pediatrician, Dr. Chun, 60s, kind but serious. During a routine checkup, Willow required a specialized, extremely expensive medical procedure, specifically a non-standard course of allergy immunotherapy, not fully covered by Eli's meager, self-paid insurance plan, a cost estimated at over $45,000, an astronomical sum that represented not just money, but a terrifying, insurmountable wall between his daughter and her well-being. In a moment of utter desperation, his legal aid attorney, Ms. Rodriguez, 30s, overworked, sympathetic, presented him with the cold, hard facts. The legal battle would financially ruin him before he even saw the inside of a trial, and Willow's medical needs were immediate. The impossibility intensified when Seraphina, through an intermediary, not her lawyers, subtly offered a compromise, a deal that reeked of moral compromise but promised immediate relief. Full, confidential payment for Willow's entire immunotherapy treatment and a guarantee of dropping the custody suit, in exchange for one seemingly minor, non-legal concession. Eli had to give her Maya's original handwritten sheet music for Aurora's Lullaby and agree to move his family out of the state of New York and stop playing the song publicly. The condition was a profound insult to Maya's memory, but the choice between preserving a memory and saving his daughter's health was no choice at all, forcing him to make the agonizing, soul-crushing decision to accept the help, a silent pact with the very devil who was trying to upend his world. But he had no idea this was only the beginning. Eli's reluctant agreement to Seraphina Thorne's morally compromised deal, accepting the astronomical, life-saving $45,000 for Willow's immediate medical treatment in exchange for Maya's irreplaceable sheet music and a promise to leave New York, immediately triggered the first major negative consequence, not financial but professional, demonstrating the ruthlessness and absolute control Seraphina wielded even from a distance. Within 48 hours of shaking hands on the deal with the intermediary, Eli was inexplicably fired from his main income source, the construction cleaning job in Midtown, a position he'd held for 5 years, with the termination notice vaguely citing restructuring and performance issues, a clearly fabricated excuse that evaporated his steady stream of guaranteed hours. The loss of the job, which accounted for 60% of his income, was a catastrophic blow, an immediate, brutal confirmation that Seraphina's power was absolute and that her help came with strings of devastating control, transforming the initial relief over Willow's medical funding into a paralyzing fear about their day-to-day survival. His world started to crumble as the bills piled up, the rent deadline loomed, and the remaining savings dwindled faster than expected due to hidden medical costs and the initial legal fees he couldn't recover, forcing him to work double shifts on his paper route and desperate, low-paying odd jobs found on Craigslist, pushing him past the point of physical exhaustion. The cruelest part was the emotional toll. The required move out of New York, a clause meant to sever all ties to the past, meant leaving the only home Willow had ever known, taking her away from the familiar, comforting routines of her school and friends, and away from the gravesite of her mother in Greenwood Cemetery, an emotional uprooting that felt like the final, irreversible surrender. Eli felt utterly trapped. Accepting the money had saved Willow's life but simultaneously handed over the reins of his own existence to Seraphina, who, even after withdrawing the custody suit, remained a constant, ominous shadow, leaving him to wonder if the price of saving his daughter's health was the complete and utter destruction of their stability and happiness. realizing that the deal was not a ceasefire but a long-term contract of emotional servitude. The truth was far more devastating than he could imagine. The lowest point in Eli Vance's spiraling descent came swiftly and publicly, orchestrated with precision by Seraphina Thorne's corporate machine, designed to not only silence him but to entirely discredit him in his limited social circle, ensuring that any future claims he might make about their arrangement would be instantly dismissed as the rantings of a disgruntled failure. The devastating public humiliation occurred during a small, farewell-for-now party his few friends and neighbors in Red Hook had thrown for him and Willow at a local community center. A humble event where Eli, despite his profound exhaustion, tried to maintain a facade of optimistic resilience for his daughter's sake. As he was giving a heartfelt, slightly tearful toast, thanking the few people who had supported him during the devastating legal and financial fight, a slick, professional-grade news crew from a minor local business journal suddenly burst through the doors, clearly tipped off, their cameras rolling as they cornered Eli, not to talk about his struggle, but to aggressively question him about an anonymously sourced financial scandal involving the catering company he had recently been fired from. The reporter, a sharp-featured woman named Monica, began firing accusatory questions about a fictional embezzlement scheme involving a small sum, $3,000, that Eli allegedly took, a completely false claim designed to plant doubt and tarnish his reputation, conveniently presenting a falsified, professional-looking document to the cameras that seemed to confirm the narrative. The small crowd, initially supportive, began to murmur and exchange shocked, doubtful glances, their expressions shifting from sympathy to cold skepticism, an instant, crushing loss of the trust he had worked so hard to build. The climax of the humiliation came when Monica, having thoroughly soiled his reputation, concluded the segment by dramatically announcing the anonymous donor, implying a benevolent savior covering the debts of a shady employee who had paid for Willow's expensive medical treatment, naming Seraphina Thorne and her charitable foundation, painting her as a saint and Eli as a desperate, unreliable man who had almost jeopardized his child's health before being rescued by the CEO's kindness, effectively spinning the coerced agreement as a public act of charity to cover his alleged crime. Eli stood there, speechless, the camera lights burning into his eyes, his carefully chosen words of thanks and resilience choked by the sudden, overwhelming injustice, watching his community's sympathy turn into judgment, realizing that his agreement had given Seraphina not just the sheet music and his relocation, but the ability to completely rewrite his entire life story, publicly painting him as the villain in his own struggle. At that moment, everything started to change, but he had no idea this was only the beginning. Just as the devastating public humiliation reached its peak, with Eli standing paralyzed under the hot camera lights, his reputation in tatters, a completely unexpected and utterly mysterious character entered the community center, causing a sudden, dramatic shift in the atmosphere and exploding the existing confusion around Seraphina Thorne's motives. The new arrival was Julian Thorne, 42, impeccable silver-gray suit, an unnerving resemblance to Seraphina but with a far colder, almost predatory gaze. Seraphina's estranged older brother and the vice chairman of Thorne Global Holdings, a powerful, shadowy figure known in business circles for his ruthless ambition and his own, equally vast, independent fortune. Julian did not address Eli or the media. Instead, he walked directly up to the reporter, Monica, and with a quiet authority that instantly silenced the room and the camera crew, he smoothly confiscated the falsified embezzlement document, replacing it with a far more detailed, legally dense financial audit on the catering company. Not one implicating Eli, but one highlighting gross financial mismanagement and questionable land deals tied directly to Seraphina Thorne's corporate rivals, specifically mentioning a shadowy real estate holding company called Aurora Properties, LLC. Julian's action was a spectacular, public contradiction to the narrative Seraphina's team had planted, a calculated countermove that instantly confused the situation, making Eli, and everyone watching, question which Thorne's sibling was actually pulling the strings and what their true objective was. Before anyone could recover, Julian turned his attention to Eli, not with sympathy, but with an intense, calculated scrutiny, whispering, "You played the song. The Lullaby. I know who wrote it. You are a loose end, Eli Vance. A very valuable one. Seraphina thinks she can buy you out of the state, but she can't buy me off. Keep the check, but don't move a single mile from this city. I will be in touch. Your silence is now worth more than her money." And then, just as suddenly, he was gone, leaving behind a whirlwind of conflicting information. A CEO who paid a fortune to silence him, and another, equally powerful sibling who seemed determined to keep him in the city and leverage his unexpected connection to the past. The confusion exploded as Eli was left standing between two corporate behemoths, both with the same last name, both obsessed with the same song, but with diametrically opposed objectives, realizing that the custody battle had been a mere smokescreen for something much larger and more dangerous involving family rivalry and a hidden, multi-million-dollar asset. The truth was far more devastating than he could imagine. Julian Thorne's sudden, chaotic intervention in Eli's public humiliation only served to escalate the danger and confusion, transforming the initial class warfare injustice into a Byzantine, corporate power struggle with Eli and Willow caught devastatingly in the crossfire, leading to a new, even greater injustice that cost Eli almost everything. The day after Julian's warning, Seraphina Thorne's legal team, clearly enraged by her brother's public undermining, executed a brutal, punitive retaliation against Eli that was both swift and legally sanctioned, seizing control of his bank account that contained the $45,000 for Willow's immunotherapy. The new injustice was an injunction filed by Thorne Global Holdings, claiming that the money, paid through a charitable arm of the corporation, was technically misallocated company assets pending an internal audit, a move clearly designed to hurt Julian by proxy, which meant the life-saving funds were immediately frozen, leaving Eli with absolutely nothing. No savings, no income, and now no access to the medical funds, which were held hostage in a high-stakes corporate feud. The loss of the money was a critical, life-threatening blow, but the subsequent injustice was the complete severing of his few remaining personal assets. He could no longer afford the mounting legal fees he had incurred fighting the initial custody suit, forcing his sympathetic legal aide Ms. Rodriguez to reluctantly withdraw, leaving him legally unrepresented, and the mounting pressure of the rent combined with his now non-existent income meant the 30-day eviction clause in his apartment lease was immediately activated. Eli lost almost everything: his financial security, his legal representation, his home, and most agonizingly, the peace of mind regarding Willow's health, as the immunotherapy was put on immediate hold, turning the initial relief into a cold, crushing despair. Sitting on a single, worn suitcase outside his old apartment building on the cold Brooklyn sidewalk, holding Willow's hand as they watched the moving crew, hired by the landlord, haul out the last of their meager possessions, including the salvaged upright piano that now seemed like the cursed object that had ruined their lives, Eli realized the full, terrifying extent of being collateral damage in a billionaire's feud. They had weaponized his love for his daughter and his poverty to steal his past, his present, and now his very future, leaving him utterly alone and adrift in the city, realizing that the truth was far more devastating than he could imagine and that what happened next would shock everyone. The loss of their apartment, the freezing of Willow's critical medical funds, and the forced reliance on temporary, often unstable shelter, a series of increasingly depressing short-term stays in cheap, impersonal motels on the outskirts of Queens and Staten Island, pushed Eli Vance to his absolute breaking point, a period of profound despondency that represented his darkest moment and brought him terrifyingly close to complete surrender. The cumulative weight of the injustice, being framed, evicted, and having his daughter's health care snatched away, manifested as a debilitating emotional and physical shutdown. He stopped answering the few worried calls he received from his remaining friends, began missing shifts on his paper route, which he now had to complete via public transit and long walks, and often found himself staring blankly at the peeling wallpaper of their temporary rooms, unable to summon the energy to even speak to Willow. His mind a relentless, dark loop of failure and self-recrimination. The moment of near surrender came on a cold, rainy Tuesday night in a sterile motel room in Astoria, Queens, a room whose window offered a distant, cynical view of the glittering Manhattan skyline, the very city that had chewed him up and spat him out. Willow, her face pale, her breathing shallow due to a mild allergic reaction, asked him, in a tiny, heartbroken whisper, "Daddy, are we lost forever? Did Mommy forget where we are?" A question that felt like a physical blow, snapping the fragile thread of his remaining resolve. In that instant of absolute despair, Eli considered the unthinkable, contacting Seraphina Thorne directly and offering to sign over full, permanent custody of Willow, along with every single remaining personal memento of Maya, including the precious silver locket, with the single, soul-crushing condition that she unfreeze the $45,000 for the immunotherapy and simply leave him alone, a total, final capitulation that would save Willow's life at the ultimate cost of his own paternal role. He pulled out his worn, cheap flip phone, his thumb hovering over the number of Seraphina's lawyer, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm of defeat, believing this final sacrifice of his relationship with his daughter was the only way to ensure her survival, a choice born not of malice or neglect, but of a profound, bottomless love and a crippling sense of inadequacy in the face of corporate-level malice, feeling the icy grip of the abyss pull him under. Little did he know that the truth was far more devastating than he could imagine. But this was only the beginning of a sudden, unexpected change. Just as Eli's finger was inches from calling Seraphina's lawyer to enact his final, devastating surrender, a small, unexpected gesture of kindness, completely detached from the Thorne power struggle, intervened and momentarily pulled him back from the precipice, a lifeline thrown by a stranger that rekindled a flicker of desperately needed hope. While trying to secure temporary housing assistance at a bustling local church in Flushing, Queens, Eli, exhausted and visibly distraught, collapsed onto a hard wooden bench, attracting the attention of Mrs. Elena Petrova, 70s, kindly, Russian-speaking, a former piano teacher, who, observing his defeated posture and Willow's quiet distress, simply placed a meticulously wrapped sandwich, salami and rye bread, a small, tangible comfort, into his hands and, noticing his calloused fingers, commented, softly in broken English, "A man with such hands should not be without his music," before pressing a crumpled, handwritten note into his palm. The small gesture, a simple acknowledgement of his humanity and his passion, was the first non-judgmental human contact he'd had in weeks, providing a tiny, necessary spark of resolve, a small reminder of his identity beyond his failures. The strange information appeared when he later unfolded the note, which wasn't a platitude but a specific, baffling instruction. The melody, the F-sharp major chord. Check the second line of the original score. Check the name ARM Construction on the back of the catering uniform. The note was specific, cryptic, and pointed directly at details only relevant to the inner circle of the people who had hired him and fired him. He immediately recognized ARM Construction as the company that had suddenly and suspiciously purchased the land where his cleaning job was located and was rumored to be Julian Thorne's silent competitor in a major real estate bid against Seraphina's company. The strange reference to the F-sharp major chord and the original score linked the corporate mystery directly back to Maya's music, suggesting a hidden message within the melody he'd played, hinting that the song itself was not just sentimental but held the key to a critical, tangible secret. This combination of an unexpected human kindness and the sudden appearance of targeted, strange information injected a crucial, life-changing element of suspicion into Eli's despair, causing him to instantly abort the call to the lawyer, realizing that his surrender might not only sacrifice Willow but also bury a critical truth that Maya had somehow encoded into her last, best work. What happened next would shock everyone. Armed with Mrs. Petrova's cryptic note, which meticulously linked the F-sharp major chord in Aurora's Lullaby to the mysterious real estate firm ARM Construction, Eli's despair quickly transitioned into a simmering, focused suspicion that nothing in the past 6 agonizing months had been by chance, that the entire series of misfortunes was a meticulously choreographed set of dominoes pushed by an unseen hand. His suspicions solidified when he was able to secure temporary access to a computer at a public library in Queens and, using his limited but specific knowledge gleaned from his construction cleaning days, cross-referenced the ARM Construction Company name with New York State Land Registry records. He discovered a complex, paper-thin network of shell companies, all leading back to a single, anonymous holding group that had recently acquired the title for not only the land where his old job was located, but also the building that housed the catering company that fired him and, most damningly, the master lease on his now evicted Brooklyn apartment. The landlord who couldn't explain the sudden eviction clause was merely a figurehead. The terrifying realization dawned upon him. The targeting of his jobs, the sudden eviction, the bizarre denial of his raise. All of it had been a systematic, precise operation to isolate, destabilize, and ultimately force him out of the city, not by Seraphina herself, but by a third party utilizing her corporate rivalry with Julian as a sophisticated form of cover. The deepest suspicion revolved around the music. Why did the specific F-sharp chord and the original score matter so much? He remembered Maya meticulously working on that piece during a summer they spent in the Hamptons, a period when she was also working on a complex arrangement for a wealthy, private client involved in high-stakes construction and development, a connection he had dismissed at the time as simple contract work. Eli realized with a chilling certainty that the song was not just a nostalgic trigger for Seraphina but a hidden key, a piece of encoded information that Maya, anticipating potential danger or corporate malfeasance, had deliberately woven into her music, and the simple act of playing it publicly had served as a catastrophic unintended signal to both the Thorne siblings and, most likely, the actual shadowy entity behind the ARM shell companies. He understood that the custody suit, the public humiliation, and the frozen funds were all secondary tactics, a clever, cruel way to neutralize him before he could accidentally decipher the song's true meaning, transforming his fight from a personal struggle for custody into an unwilling involvement in a multi-million-dollar corporate espionage plot that had cost him almost everything. The truth was far more devastating than he could imagine. The culmination of Eli's focused investigation, fueled by the terrifying suspicion that he was a pawn in a larger game, led directly to the shocking revelation of a profound betrayal and the exposure of the great lie that underpinned his entire traumatic experience. After an agonizing few days spent attempting to reconstruct Maya's original score from memory, focusing specifically on the structural role of the F-sharp major chord, Eli recalled a very specific technical detail about her manuscript. She had used a complex, custom-made watermark on the back of the music sheet, an intertwining of the letters M and A, which she created herself. His pursuit of this detail led him to a retired music publisher in New Jersey, Mr. Goldstein, 80s frail, sharp memory, a man who had worked with Maya briefly on an independent project. The great lie was revealed when Mr. Goldstein, after a brief, tense conversation, confirmed that the original score of Aurora's Lullaby had indeed been printed with that specific watermark, but then, dropping a bombshell that shattered Eli's perception of his late wife's final months, added, "And I remember the client, a man named Elias Vance, who claimed to be her brother-in-law, picked up the final copies. He paid in cash and insisted on two specific alterations, one involving the F-sharp chord's voicing, and the other, the most crucial, the removal of a small, handwritten dedication on the final page. The betrayal was that the man who had facilitated the professional printing and claimed the copies, the man Eli hadn't seen in over 7 years, his older half-brother who had disappeared after a minor legal dispute, had been Elias Vance, 45, charming but unreliable, a history of involvement in shady real estate deals. The implications were staggering. Silas, not Seraphina or Julian, was the actual common denominator, the one who had handled the score and the one with deep ties to the corporate world, confirming Eli's worst fears that the song held a material secret. This meant that the sheet music Seraphina demanded was likely a decoy, and the original, watermarked copy contained the true, hidden information, a fact that had been deliberately obscured by Silas, who was almost certainly working for or against the Thorne siblings, using Eli's vulnerability and Willow's situation as the perfect distraction. The shocking realization that his own brother, whom he had trusted completely during the confusing aftermath of Maya's death, was the one who had altered the musical key to the conspiracy and then gone silent, plunged Eli into a deeper, more agonizing emotional abyss than the corporate injustice ever could, transforming his fight from one against strangers to a devastating personal war against his own blood. And little did he know that this was only the beginning of a confrontation that would unearth secrets buried thousands of miles away. The revelation of his half-brother, Elias Vance's, calculated betrayal, manipulating the fate of Maya's music and using Eli's poverty as cover for a deeper corporate scheme, triggered the strongest emotional fall Eli had yet experienced, a devastating collapse that left him feeling profoundly, completely alone. The corporate injustice, though cruel, had been external, something he could fight, but Silas's involvement, the manipulation by family, poisoned the very foundation of his memories of Maya and his trust in the few people he held dear. This emotional devastation manifested not as anger, but as a paralyzing, isolating grief, forcing him to momentarily abandon his investigative momentum. A deep, pervasive sense of being orphaned once again, even with his daughter by his side, realizing that the one person he thought he could always rely on had been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. The most immediate, tangible consequence of this fall was the complete isolation. His last remaining friend from Red Hook, a former colleague named Marco, stopped returning his increasingly desperate calls, having believed the embezzlement story fueled by the public humiliation, and the small network of acquaintances he had built through his odd jobs evaporated as he became consumed by his investigation and his emotional breakdown. He was truly alone, unable to share the horrifying truth about Silas with Willow, who was now experiencing recurring nightmares and a noticeable regression in her behavior due to the relentless instability of their lives. The darkest moment within this fall came when Eli, sitting alone in a cheap, airless laundromat late one night, watching their few remaining clothes spin, realized he no longer even had the right to the grief he felt, because his memories of Maya were now tainted by the possibility that even her final act, the creation of the Lullaby, had been subverted and used as a corporate tool, leaving him with the terrifying, self-doubt-fueled question of whether his love for her had been blind and naive. The weight of the lie, the betrayal, and the crushing financial reality, Willow's health was deteriorating with the lack of treatment, broke him down into a silent, racking sob, hunched over his daughter's tiny, worn teddy bear, feeling like the most spectacular failure of a father, a husband, and a man, completely stripped of support, hope, and any sense of control, convinced that his only purpose now was to ensure Willow's survival, even if it meant his own utter obliteration. And little did he know that at that moment, everything started to change. During Eli's period of profound emotional isolation and professional stasis, while he was physically and mentally broken, something profound began to change in silence. A subtle shift in the corporate landscape surrounding him, an almost imperceptible movement that signaled the start of his eventual comeback. Having seemingly dropped off the radar due to his eviction and lack of a permanent address, Eli became, paradoxically, harder to track, creating a temporary vacuum of information that allowed his two corporate enemies, Seraphina and Julian Thorne, to move against each other more aggressively, each assuming the loose end Eli had been neutralized by the other. The silent change was the sudden, unexpected reappearance of the upright piano, the same one he had salvaged and later had removed during his eviction, which was mysteriously delivered to the communal basement of the apartment building where Mrs. Petrova lived in Flushing, Queens, along with a note from an anonymous sender. The music must be played. The F-sharp is the code. Look for the address in the sheet. This action was a direct, material contradiction to Seraphina's earlier demand that he stop playing the song and leave the city, suggesting a powerful, unknown party was not only tracking his location but actively encouraging him to pursue the very secret Seraphina sought to suppress, confirming that the fight was still active and that someone was fighting for him. The second change was the sudden, discreet transfer of a small, yet significant, sum of money, $1,500, enough to cover 2 weeks of rent and groceries and a temporary refill of Willow's medication, into a new, anonymous bank account opened under Willow's name, an action completely untraceable to either Thorne's sibling, a precise and timely intervention that offered immediate, critical relief without the ethical cost of Seraphina's $45,000 hostage money, providing the necessary breathing room for Eli to stabilize and redirect his focus from survival to investigation. This silent, dual intervention, the return of the instrument, and the anonymous funds, acted as a crucial psychological bridge, transforming his passive grief into active, quiet resolution, confirming his suspicion that the song held the true key and that he had a silent, powerful ally, or at the very least, an entity whose interests were temporarily aligned with his survival and the revelation of the truth. At that moment, Eli realized he wasn't completely alone, but rather an active, monitored player in a game of which he was only just beginning to learn the rules. Little did he know that the truth was far more devastating than he could imagine. The silence was broken by the emergence of the new, unexpected ally, a figure who not only had the resources and inside knowledge to help Eli, but whose appearance pulled the past back to the surface with a jarring force, fundamentally changing the dynamics of his battle. The ally was Ms. Clara Jensen, 55, pragmatic, former high-ranking executive at Thorne Global Holdings, now a private consultant, who met Eli in a quiet, obscure cafe in a commercial part of Queens, having located him via the anonymous bank transfer she had discreetly initiated. Clara wasn't motivated by altruism, but by a powerful, decades-old loyalty to a man she claimed Seraphina had ruthlessly sidelined. Seraphina's and Julian's late father, the true founder of the Thorne Empire, a man who had secretly championed the concept of a multimillion-dollar affordable housing project that Seraphina was now attempting to kill via corporate maneuvering involving the ARM construction shell companies. The past returned to the surface when Clara revealed the astonishing connection between Maya, the song, and Seraphina. Maya was not just Seraphina's high school sweetheart. She was Seraphina's estranged half-sister, born from their father's brief affair during his early career struggles in Montauk, a secret the father had protected fiercely and which Seraphina had violently suppressed after his death. This revelation transformed Seraphina's obsession with the song from a romantic memory into a desperate attempt to suppress the existence of a blood relation that could potentially challenge her sole ownership of the Thorne estate, explaining the identical lockets and her cryptic, "We were once family" comment. Clara's alliance was conditional. She needed Eli to publicly expose the truth hidden in the sheet music to prevent Seraphina from killing the affordable housing project and honoring her late father's legacy. The true, devastating detail emerged when Clara explained the F-sharp chord's code. In the original score, the musical notes corresponding to the F-sharp major chord were also a literal cipher, with each note corresponding to a number, and the full sequence spelled out the coordinates of an offshore trust fund, worth over $150 million. The true financial asset Seraphina was trying to protect, tied to the affordable housing project, a trust fund that Maya, as the secret, acknowledged daughter, was a silent beneficiary of. Eli's simple struggle for custody had exploded into a conspiracy involving corporate malfeasance, a hidden half-sister, and a massive sequestered fortune, revealing that the true fight was not for a song, but for an inheritance and the fulfillment of a dead man's altruistic vision. And he had no idea this was only the beginning. With the explosive truth of Maya's identity as Seraphina's half-sister and the cipher embedded in Aurora's Lullaby now in his possession, Elias Vance was immediately put to the test again by his unexpected ally, Clara Jensen, in a high-stakes scenario designed to prove his loyalty and resilience, a trial that simultaneously exposed the depth of Seraphina's desperation. The test was a trap. Clara arranged a clandestine meeting between Eli and Julian Thorne, the estranged brother, ostensibly to hand over the coordinates of the offshore trust, but the location was leaked, deliberately by Clara, to Seraphina's security team, ensuring a massive corporate ambush. The scenario was set in the sterile, dimly lit, loading dock of an unused warehouse near the waterfront in Long Island City, a location Eli knew intimately from his old cleaning job days. And the test was simple. Eli had to navigate the tense, almost violent confrontation with Seraphina's aggressive security detail, led by a menacing man named Dex, a former private military contractor, and successfully deliver the coded coordinates to Julian without revealing the full truth about Maya's parentage, thus protecting Clara and Julian's final, devastating move, while simultaneously maintaining the ethical line that the fight was about justice for Willow and Maya's memory, not merely personal enrichment. The pressure was immense. Seraphina herself arrived at the scene in a black sedan, her face a mask of cold fury, offering Eli a direct, final bribe, the immediate, no-strings-attached transfer of the $150 million trust into Willow's name and a guaranteed, anonymous life in Europe, in exchange for handing over all of the information and agreeing to disappear forever. Eli was forced to make a profound ethical decision under extreme duress. Take the immediate, life-altering financial escape, securing Willow's future forever but burying his wife's truth and allowing Seraphina to destroy the affordable housing project, or resist the colossal temptation, trust the new, fragile alliance, and continue the fight for true justice. He resisted, holding his ground against Dex's physical intimidation and Seraphina's devastating offer, choosing to hand Julian only the cipher's key, the coordinates for the trust fund, while looking Seraphina directly in the eye and stating with quiet, unwavering conviction, "You can't pay me to forget who my wife was, Seraphina. That song is the only truth you fear." A statement that confirmed his absolute resolve and turned a simple corporate skirmish into a profound moral victory. signaling that he was no longer a victim but a formidable, righteous opponent. What happened next would shock everyone. Eli's unwavering refusal of Seraphina Thorne's colossal $150 million bribe and his successful delivery of the cipher key to Julian Thorne immediately yielded the first great reward, a material and emotional victory that finally began to turn the tide and allowed long-suppressed truths to appear, confirming the ultimate righteousness of his struggle. The great reward was a public, legal victory orchestrated by Julian Thorne's legal team. Leveraging the trust fund coordinates Eli provided, Julian successfully used the offshore account information to execute a hostile takeover of the ARM construction shell companies, effectively stopping Seraphina's illegal land grab scheme in its tracks and, more importantly, releasing the frozen $45,000 for Willow's immunotherapy, which was discreetly transferred back to a dedicated, independent medical trust, ensuring her life-saving treatment could finally begin. The first true moment of peace Eli had experienced in months. The truths began to appear in the subsequent, inevitable press coverage of the Thorne corporate scandal. The investigation into the ARM companies revealed not just corporate malfeasance but also the shadowy involvement of his half-brother, Elias Vance, who was named as a key operative in the shell company network, his complicity in stealing and altering Maya's sheet music now publicly exposed, clearing Eli's name of the embezzlement lie and restoring his shattered reputation in the community, providing a critical moral vindication. The most profound truth appeared privately when Seraphina Thorne, now cornered and facing a barrage of lawsuits and internal corporate audits, requested a final, personal meeting with Eli, not in a courtroom or a corporate office, but at the grave of Maya in Greenwood Cemetery. At the meeting, Seraphina, completely stripped of her corporate armor, finally confessed the devastating, long-held lie. She revealed that she had hired Silas years ago, not to steal the music, but to silence him after their father's death, fearing the public scandal of Maya's parentage and the threat to her inheritance. But that Silas, seeing an opportunity for greater wealth, had gone rogue, creating the ARM company and using Eli's spontaneous piano performance as the trigger for his own blackmail scheme. The truth was that Seraphina's initial pursuit had been driven by a twisted, agonizing mixture of shame, greed, and a deep, suppressed love for her half-sister, Maya, admitting, "The song wasn't a threat to the company, Eli. It was a threat to my heart. I couldn't let anyone know she was more than just a memory," finally confessing the devastating emotional truth that had fueled the entire devastating conflict, transforming the ruthless CEO into a broken, deeply flawed human being who had allowed fear and ambition to destroy an innocent family. The truth was far more devastating than he could imagine. The final, emotionally shattering meeting at Maya's gravesite brought not only Seraphina Thorne's full confession and the material victory of Willow's health funding, but also the ultimate revelation of the true mysterious character who had guided Eli from the shadows, culminating in the complete emotional victory and the final, sweeping justice he and Willow deserved. The final revelation was that the mysterious, powerful character who had returned the piano, funded the anonymous account, and left the cryptic note about the F-sharp major chord was none other than Julian Thorne, Seraphina's estranged brother, who, driven by a deep loyalty to his late father's memory and a quiet, decades-long revulsion for his sister's ruthless corporate tactics, had been quietly monitoring the situation, using Eli as the innocent, essential key to dismantle Seraphina's illegal operations and uphold the family's altruistic commitment to the affordable housing project. Julian, arriving after Seraphina had departed, confirmed his role, explaining that he had been forced to act entirely in the shadows because, had Seraphina or Silas discovered his involvement, they would have targeted Willow directly, forcing him to orchestrate the entire counter-movement in complete silence. The ultimate justice arrived in two forms. First, the official arrest of Elias Vance, Eli's treacherous half-brother, in a neighboring state on multiple charges of corporate fraud and blackmail, finally neutralizing the true, self-serving antagonist who had initiated the chaos. Second, the emotional victory was realized when Julian, seeing Eli's exhaustion and the strength of his paternal love, not only established a permanent, fully funded trust fund for Willow's education and health, but also, in a final, profound act of reparation and reconciliation, signed over the title to a beautiful, two-bedroom apartment in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood in Brooklyn, just blocks from Willow's school, allowing Eli to finally settle down and provide the stable, secure life he had fought so desperately for. A home where the salvaged upright piano now sat proudly in the living room. Eli, no longer a victim but a victor, stood at Maya's grave with Willow, their hands intertwined, feeling the immense weight of the past 6 months lift, realizing that his simple, spontaneous act of love, playing his late wife's song, had not destroyed his life but had ultimately served as the catalyst for an intricate process of exposure, justice, and redemption. A song that had fought for them both, allowing him to finally close the door on the trauma and look toward a future defined by peace, stability, and the quiet, enduring legacy of his wife's love, confirmed that the love he had lost had ultimately saved him and his daughter, realizing that what happened next would shock everyone, as his simple life transformed into one of well-deserved reward and peace. Now that you have witnessed the full, breathtaking, emotionally exhausting 70-minute intensity of Elias Vance's saga, the struggling single father, the grief-stricken widower, the piano player with calloused hands and a breaking heart who went from playing a single nostalgic melody on a beat-up, donated upright piano in a cramped Manhattan community center to becoming the unlikely, unstoppable wrecking ball that shattered a $5 billion corporate conspiracy, exposed a decades-old family, secret buried in encrypted files and offshore accounts, brought down an entire network of corrupt executives, and reclaimed the stolen legacy of his late wife, Maya Vance, the brilliant scientist whose groundbreaking cancer research was weaponized by those she trusted most. Let this profound, life-altering narrative sink deep into your perspective, your understanding of power, betrayal, and the human capacity for resilience. This is not just another story of struggle and triumph. This is the ultimate, indispensable, battle-tested survival guide for navigating the modern era, a masterclass in standing firm when the entire world is collapsing around you, synthesizing 3 monumental, non-negotiable, deeply proven life lessons that separate the defeated, the broken, and the forgotten from the truly victorious, the remembered, and the redeemed. First and foremost, the supreme, absolutely non-negotiable importance of holding your emotional line, no matter the cost, no matter the pressure, no matter how tempting the escape route appears. We watched Eli refuse not just $150 million in cold, hard cash, enough to solve every single financial problem he had ever faced, enough to guarantee Willow's medical care for life, enough to buy back his dignity and his peace, but also the promise of instant safety, the immediate end of all his suffering, the silencing of the media circus that was destroying his reputation, and the chance to disappear into comfort and anonymity, simply because he could not and would not compromise the memory, the truth, and the scientific legacy of his late wife, Maya, the woman who had died believing her research would save lives, not enrich criminals. This teaches you with undeniable, crystal-clear clarity that your integrity, your core values, your fundamental truth, is not an optional accessory, not a negotiable item on the bargaining table, not something you can temporarily set aside when things get difficult. It is your most valuable, most powerful, most non-tradable asset, the only thing that can withstand the crushing, relentless weight of systemic injustice, corrupt power structures, and the soul-destroying machinery of corporate greed. Second, the staggering, unsettling truth about the geography of betrayal. The most complex, most dangerous, most devastating threat to your stability, your peace, and your future will rarely come from a stranger on the street, an anonymous enemy in the shadows, or some distant, faceless corporation. Instead, it will come from the calculated, intimate, psychologically sophisticated manipulation of someone you trust deeply, someone who knows your vulnerabilities, someone who has access to your heart, your secrets, and your greatest fears. Like Eli's own brother, Elias Vance, the man who grew up in the same house, who shared the same parents, who attended Maya's funeral and held Willow as a baby, yet who coldly, methodically turned Maya's life-saving cancer research into a corporate blackmail weapon, a tool of control and profit, stealing not just money but the very meaning of her life's work. This demands, absolutely demands, that you keep your guard up, that you understand with painful clarity that personal relationships, family ties, and emotional bonds often carry the highest stakes, the deepest wounds, and the most catastrophic consequences when trust is violated, teaching us that vigilance is not paranoia. It is wisdom earned through suffering. Third, the astonishing, almost miraculous reality of delayed, earned reward. The profound truth that your darkest moment, your most painful sacrifice, your most humiliating defeat may actually be the precise setup for your most overwhelming victory. Eli's first spontaneous, unplanned act of pure love and grief, playing the lullaby for Maya on that battered piano in front of a small, indifferent crowd, initially cost him absolutely everything. His job at the warehouse, his tiny rent-controlled apartment, his carefully built reputation in the community, his sense of safety and stability, and nearly, almost fatally, his daughter Willow, who was left vulnerable and exposed during the fallout. Yet, through resilience, through refusal to give up, through the mysterious intervention of allies he never knew he had, that same spontaneous musical act became the precise, perfectly coded key to his eventual liberation, leading directly to the criminal prosecution of Silas, the public humbling and corporate downfall of Seraphina Hale, the securing of Willow's full medical treatment and long-term health, the restoration of Maya's scientific reputation and legacy, and the final, beautiful, stable, and emotionally healing home in Brooklyn, proving beyond any shadow of doubt that the deepest suffering, the biggest sacrifices, and the most devastating losses are often the necessary, divinely orchestrated setup for the most overwhelming, spectacular, life-changing turnarounds. If you have ever felt trapped, small, powerless, or crushed by forces beyond your control, if you have ever wondered whether fighting back is worth it, if you have ever questioned whether justice is even possible, this is the definitive, undeniable proof that the quiet, determined, unbreakable fighter within you holds the winning strategy, the hidden strength, and the ultimate key to securing justice, redemption, and a future worth living. This is not just entertainment. This is preparation. This is your blueprint for survival and victory in a world that will test you, betray you, and try to break you. Elias Vance's story is your story, and his victory can be your victory too. If this monumental, action-packed, emotionally resonant, and profoundly moving epic, Elias Vance's masterful, unforgettable journey through devastating emotional falls, strategic corporate warfare, shocking family revelations, breathtaking legal battles, mysterious allies appearing from the shadows, heart-wrenching moments with his daughter Willow, and his glorious, tear-jerking, justice-restoring victory that corrected a multi-million-dollar injustice and exposed corruption at the highest levels, has left you completely engrossed, emotionally invested, and deeply moved for the last hour and 10 minutes. Then there is absolutely no doubt, no question, no hesitation. This channel is perfect for you. We are the premier, #1 destination for building and delivering the most spectacular, highest stakes, most emotionally complex narratives of underdog triumph, unbelievable turnarounds, unexpected allies emerging from nowhere, shocking betrayals from those closest to you, multi-layered, corporate conspiracies, family secrets that change everything, and the overwhelming, satisfying, deeply earned victory of justice over corruption. We promise and we deliver. Only the most wonderfully constructed, emotionally layered, psychologically deep, and life-affirming stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, rooting for the hero, crying at the setbacks, and cheering at the final victory. These are not shallow, predictable tales. These are cinematic, expertly crafted, 70-minute epics designed to make you feel, think, and believe in the power of the human spirit. Let the next powerful, mind-blowing, heart-pounding saga of corporate secrets, buried family lies, unexpected wealth, shocking revelations, and absolutely deserved justice pass you by. The next story could be even more intense, even more emotional, even more satisfying than Eli's, and you do not want to miss it. Right now, immediately, without hesitation, do these 3 essential things. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not later, not tomorrow, right now, and make absolutely sure the notification bell is ringing, activated, and ready to alert you the second we drop the next incredible story. Do not let another masterpiece slip past you. Join our growing community of justice seekers, story lovers, and believers in the power of redemption. We are building something special here, and you are a part of it. Smash that like button to show your support, your appreciation, and your respect for Eli's incredible, inspiring, exhausting fight. Every like tells us you want more stories like this. Every like is a vote for justice, for complex characters, for emotional depth, for stories that matter. If the story moved you, if it made you angry at the injustice, if it made you cry at the reunion, if it made you cheer at the final victory, show us by hitting that like button right now. And finally, most importantly, we want to connect with you personally. Drop a comment right now telling us what city, state, or country you are watching this video from. Are you watching from New York like Eli? From California? From Texas? From London? From Tokyo? From São Paulo? We love knowing where our amazing global community is fighting for justice alongside us. Tell us where you are, and while you're at it, let us know. What was your favorite moment in Eli's story? What shocked you the most? What made you cry? What made you angry? We read every single comment, and your voice matters to us. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Eli's story. Do you know someone who is struggling? Someone who feels powerless? Someone who needs to believe that justice is possible? Send them this video. Share it on your social media. Spread the message that resilience wins, that integrity matters, and that justice, no matter how delayed, will eventually arrive. Join us, subscribe, engage, and prepare yourself for more marvelous, unforgettable stories that will change the way you see the world. We are just getting started, and the best is yet to come. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the fight. Welcome to the community that believes in justice, truth, and the unbreakable human spirit. See you in the next story. And trust us, you will not want to miss it.